friendship that'll never ever end.
Run!
It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. Reaction Video 741. Tighten that neighborhood, my brothers and sisters. It is that time to get into another one of these true crime, horror, dark, deep, and mysterious, what the is going on type of videos. And today, we're going back to the man, the Coffee Man, better known as Adrian from Coffeehouse. Crime! Back to the Coffee Man Bean Team. And the title of the video is Arrogant Officer's Evil Plan on X Exposed by His Own Evidence. Now I'm wondering, Bean Team, did his evil plan get exposed before or after he carried it out? You know what I'm saying? Did he get away with this craziness and then the authorities found out? Or did they stop him in his tracks before he can carry out the craziness? I don't know, but we're about to see. But before we see, Bean Team, y'all know what y'all got to do. Get whatever you may need. Get what you need, please. We are back to Coffeehouse Crime. Y'all got what y'all need. Y'all ready to go? Then let's go.
On July the 9th, 2024, British police were called to a property on Ashland Close in Bushey, Hertfordshire. Officers already knew it was going to be bad. However, none of them were ready to discover what was waiting for them behind closed doors. And as they continued with their horrific discoveries, they soon realized that this was certainly no mere accident, and the man who was responsible for all of this, well, he was missing too. This is one of those stories that will just completely baffle you, and includes crossbows, multiple murders, an unfortunate incident, and more than one murderer, actually. And so, on that note, welcome to Coffeehouse Crime, folks. My name is Adrian, if you haven't been here before, and if you like true crime, strange, or chilling stories, then please consider subscribing. And now, with that said, please, grab yourself a coffee. This is the case of Kyle Clifford.
Get whatever you may need.
It was shortly before 7 PM that officers received a phone call. The caller, who identified herself as Hannah Hunt, feared she was going to die. And so, naturally, the operator wasted no time in tracking down her address and sending several officers to the property, which was located in Bushey in Hertfordshire. Bushey is a small town which can be found southeast of Watford. Both quiet and surrounded by farmland and fields, it is an excellent place for young families and professionals alike who want to live near London but also have the countryside. But let me tell you, that phone call and what officers would find after was definitely not family friendly. When officers arrived at the property, they found Hannah alive in the central doorway of the home with a crossbow bolt in her chest. And although her heart was still beating, she was merely clinging to life and her breathing was shallow. Sadly, this was only the beginning. Walking further into the property, they found the bodies of two more women in an adjacent room. It appeared that they too had been brutally attacked, with the younger woman in her 20s suffering the same injuries as Hannah, that being a single crossbow bolt to the chest. It also looked like she had her arms tied behind her back with silver duct tape, and her ankles had also been bound. The older woman, who appeared to be their mother, had significant injuries, including stab wounds to her knee, hands, back, and torso, many of which were believed to have been defensive wounds against her attacker. Within minutes, dozens of more officers had swarmed the area. It looked like this house had suffered an enormous amount of brutality, and with Hannah tragically passing away in the company of officers, it marked 3 murders with a killer yet to be identified. Over the course of the following hours, armed police moved from house to house, not only asking them to remain indoors until further notice, but also to question them if they'd seen or heard anything suspicious. That is when they realized that several of the neighbors had recalled hearing screaming, but could not tell if it was serious. Police officers would also request dashcam and doorbell footage, which soon enough would become pivotal in solving this case.
And it's like, dude, it's one thing for you to murder your ex, but to murder her family members too, it's like, come on, bro. And in the way it go, it's effed up. But I'm just saying, like, you had to kill her mama and her sister too. Like, it's just ridiculous, man. Let's see if he get caught and actually face the consequences that he deserved. And then one thing the Coffee Man said is that it's more than one murderer. Let's see what that's all about too.
But before I tell you about what happened next, because trust me, there is so much more to be said about this horrific story, we should probably talk about who was found in the property. A total of 3 bodies were found inside, and it turns out that all 3 were women and related to each other. The mother, Carol, was 61 years old, and her 2 daughters, Louise, 25, and Hannah, 28. Whatever had gone down in this property, it was more than half the family massacred, with only their husband, John, and one of the daughters, Amy, left behind, both of which were not in the property at the time. So, with the father spared, could he have possibly been the one to, you know, murder his family? Well, actually, no. Detectives immediately ruled John out as a suspect because not only did he love his family to bits, but he was working all evening too, and had a solid alibi. However, what John did have was a theory. A theory, when backed up with a mountain of evidence, gave officers a screamer of a lead. But first, we must take a look at one of his daughters, Louise, because unfortunately, she was the tragic link to all of this. Found on a quiet road in Bushy lies the Hunt residence. The Hunts were your typical British family, comprising of Louise, 25, her sisters Hannah and Amy, and their parents John and Carol. Now, John is quite the charismatic character. Working for the BBC as a racing commentator, his voice and skills are well recognised throughout the country.
It's a sprint race for home from here. Up to the elbow. Rachel Blackmore in front on Manila Indo. But I am Maximus now. All power.
As for their mother, although not much is known about Carol, we do know that she supported her daughters endlessly, who were all busy finding their feet in the world. Hannah was a beautician, and Louise, she had set up her own business in the backyard of the family home. As the owner of Groom and Glow, she offered dog grooming services to those bushy pooches in the Bushy area. Taking a look at her website, it looks like she used to be in the salon industry before making the move into dog grooming in the year 2020. She was also trained in first aid for pets and had a passion for working with animals. Louise was well known to be a very sweet and hardworking person, and her family and friends absolutely adored her. Not only that, but her clients really appreciated her too. Not only as a groomer, but someone to talk to in the mornings. In her downtime, she would spend most of it with her friends and her family, and also attend Bushy Grove Gym, which was nearby. However, by the year 2022, Louise was about to meet a man who would change the course of her life forever. And, unfortunately, not in a good way. You see, Kyle did not have the best reputation around town, and there were plenty of reasons why her family and friends were quite concerned about her connecting with him. But as time passed by, the two grew closer, and eventually, Louise believed that she could change him for the better. So, who was Kyle? And why were people concerned about him? Kyle was born on April 5th, 1998 in Enfield, a town just north of London. And like many towns outside of the city, there is not a great deal to do here. Trapped in expensive small town living, Kyle was the kind of kid who often got in trouble at school. He was the brattish type and would frequently show his temper in emotional situations. The sort of kid that you wouldn't really want to hang around with. While growing up, or at least physically, he had previously served a short stint within the British Army, and more specifically specifically in the Queen's Dragoon Guards. The QDG, or the Welsh Cavalry, is a regiment formed by recruits from Wales and 3 other English counties. It is said that while in the army, he became obsessed with watching graphic and violent videos, and it's reported that many colleagues disliked him and would often call him a misogynist. One of the soldiers described Kyle as immature for his age and having a bit of a chip on his shoulder. He struggled to grasp basic military concepts, but unfortunately would reach the standard to pass just over the training margin. So it's no surprise that his time within the army was rather short-lived, and by the year 2022, he was out on the road yet again. Although it's unclear whether he was discharged or left himself, we do know that he was back to living in Enfield before he knew it, and when he returned, he had nothing to do. Kyle eventually found a new job as a security guard, where he was well known to be arrogant, moody, and bad-tempered. To add to that, people also say that he was very bad at socializing, and the kind of person who would just flip if something didn't go his way. It is also said that apparently his childhood was quite tumultuous, and as he grew older, he became more violent and volatile. And also, with the family moving quite often, his friendship groups were always disrupted, and when they did eventually settle, well, there were 6 of them in a 3-bedroom home. And speaking of family, well, actually, I'll make you wait until the end of this story, but trust me, it is a very rare and dramatic thing. So, it was around the beginning of 2023 that Kyle and Louise traveled beyond their friendship and, fortunately, would begin a relationship. It appears that his tough exterior seemed to give way to softer moments, and Louise absolutely loved that side of him. But as
I hate Louise got with this freaking Kyle dude. But the thing after everything that the Coffee Man just told us about his upbringing and his background, y'all, it makes sense. It kind of helped it make sense, I'll say it like that, of what he ended up doing to Louise and her mama and her sister. Because he just sound like a hothead. Long story short, story long, man. He sound like one of those hot-headed persons who, when they get mad, they'll do some crazy-ish. You know what I'm saying? And that's what he ended up doing. I just wish she would have just listened to her family members and never even got with this guy. Let's go.
Months passed by, his angry side came out, and she was exposed to his explosive behavior, and then his controlling tendencies too. He started asking Louise not to wear makeup or any revealing clothing, claiming that she was for his eyes only and no one else's. He would also hate it whenever she left the property, and by the way, this was despite not even living with her. Adding to this dangerous mix, Kyle became increasingly obsessed with online content that seemed to promote misogynistic beliefs. Friends of his noted that he frequently watched videos from online influencers who pushed extreme ideologies, and all of this content only seemed to deepen his anger and fuel his violent nature. So, once again, it's no wonder that after 18 months of being together, the relationship had ultimately become strained. Louise was deeply in love with Kyle. However, even she could see that he was not the man that she had hoped for him to be. As expected, her friends and family noticed this too. In fact, they were waiting on the sidelines, just desperately hoping that she would leave him. However, we've all been there. Louise, she desperately loved Kyle, and she found it very hard to understand and accept that this relationship was just not meant to be. After all, Kyle was pretty much her first serious relationship, and she found it almost impossible to say no. In fact, Louise was so upset about the breakup that, shortly before breaking up with him, she would accidentally drive her car into a telephone pole, just completely overwhelmed with emotion. But on June the 26th, 2024, she had finally found the strength to break things off with him. However, although it was a horrible time for the both of them, Louise desperately wanted to do this gently, carefully, and in a way that empowered Kyle. And so, in a text message, she said, "I am so sorry, Kyle. I don't know that, in the future, if we both do the work on ourselves, this could be something amazing. But I just feel right now I owe it to myself to take some space and walk away for my own sanity and health. Thank you for the incredible time we've had this year. I hope you know how much I love you and still will for a long time. I never want there to be anything nasty between us ever. Take care of yourself always, please." Believe it or not, but Kyle responded quite kindly, saying, "Thank you for the clarity, Louise, so we can both start our healing process. I love you so much and will do for a long time." However, that compassion, Yeah, it wouldn't last for very long. Within hours, Kyle was barraging Louise with hundreds of messages, just desperately clinging on to any attention he could get from her. And it wasn't just that he couldn't accept the situation, but he was upset too. Kyle was furious, not only at Louise, but also her family and friends for trying to convince her to leave him. In the aftermath of the breakup, it is said that, apparently, Kyle became obsessed not only with Louise, but also with the idea that her family had forced them apart. And of course, then came the ideas of dark revenge. And
okay, now it's making sense, Bean Team, because I know y'all remember earlier when I was like, it's one thing for him to kill her, but why you killing her sister and her mama and John? It's because he feel like all of them is the reason that him and Louise broke up. Like, dude, this dude was freaking effed up in the head, a hot-headed, misogynistic type dude. And it's crazy how Coffee Man said literally hours after she sent her text, then he replied back all nicely and like on like the SpongeBob meme. A few hours later, he gone crazy. Long story short story long, man. Just be more careful, Being Team, about who you fall in love with. Let's go.
Fortunately, revenge is precisely what he was going to seek. After finally breaking up, Kyle's world came crashing down. To add to his fury, he believed that, without Louise, he was nothing. And so, it is safe to say that he felt depressed, bitter, and was soaked in self-pity. His mind began to wander. He determined that if he couldn't have Louise, then no one could. He also determined that if he couldn't be with Louise, then he didn't want to live either. And so, Kyle came to a horrible conclusion. It was on June the 30th, 2024 that Kyle began his evil plans. He kicked off by researching potential ways to murder Louise. This included looking at weapons online and ways to restrain a victim. After finally deciding what he could tangibly buy online, he opted for a crossbow and bolts for £357, the equivalent of $461 US. He would also spend £89 on a high-level butchering knife from Amazon, the equivalent of $115 US. Now, if he was to carry out the attack, then this purchase alone would prove sustained contemplation. He would have to wait for all of this to be delivered, meaning this was no spur-of-the-moment crime of passion. On July the 6th, a surveillance camera in a local tool station recorded him purchasing a pack of rope. He seemed to think long and hard about whether he needed one large pack or two small ones instead. You should really think about what was going through his mind here. Like, will 2 sets of 20 meters of rope be enough to bind, trap, and then murder my ex? Or should I go for a roll of 50 instead? The following day, he purchased 2 tanks of fuel from a hardware store, both of which he would never use, and then in a third store, some duct tape, but just the one roll this time. By now, his crossbow and bolts had both been delivered to his property, and he had also ordered an air pistol just in case. In the days leading up to the murders, Kyle would write several letters to his family and to himself. In one letter, he wrote, "Please don't think of me as throwing my life away. I have lived, and I am grateful for everything and everyone who has been a part of it. I know you will have so many questions and will wish you could have done something to prevent this. However, none of you have failed." In another letter, which was addressed to himself, he said, "To myself, I am so sorry I didn't give myself a chance to move on past this to see the light at the end of the tunnel. I know you want to find peace and it's a battle in your head right now. What's different this time? I don't want to live my life without her. Nothing I can think of can make me happy. This is my decision to just be at peace." On the night of July the 8th, which happened to be the day before the attacks, Kyle would then jump onto his computer and search for something rather unexpected. You see, only a few weeks prior to this, one of London's main prisons fell under controversy when a video of a female warden having sex with an inmate was accidentally released to the public. I mean, I say accidentally, but it was quite obviously intentional. The prison warden, Linda D'Souza, was, quote, caught participating with evident enthusiasm in various positions. And ironically, that prison, well, it was only 10 minutes from where I used to live in London. Wow. Yikes. Anyway, it looks like Kyle was in the mood for some quite explicit prison material. likely so he could see what he could get when behind bars. Shortly after that, Kyle then checked all upcoming racing events, because he knew that Louise's father would have to attend them for his job. Because, being the true scumbag that he is, he was only prepared to murder someone if he wasn't in danger himself. In addition to this, he would also stalk Carol's Facebook page, track John's movements, and even look up the weather to see if that could affect his plans. The man was truly obsessed. One day later, on the day that he planned to commit the attack, a surveillance camera captured Kyle with his family at the garden center. You can see in this footage that he was pushing a pram around, while likely thinking about what he was planning to do just hours later. At 1:37 p.m, Kyle first parked his car away from the Hunt family home in an effort to carefully check whether Louise's father was in or out. As we know, he had already researched John's work schedule in advance, ensuring that he would not be home to intervene. After receiving confirmation that John was actually out of the property, Kyle then left the area, returning later with a bag of Louise's clothes and a thank you card which was addressed to both her parents. A calculated move to deceive Carol with his actual intention. He approached the family's doorstep, and then, moments later, Carol opened the door to greet him. Now, although she was initially surprised to see Kyle, both the bag and the card made it look like that he was there to reconcile. And so, with his warm gesture and friendly conversation, she kindly let him inside, unaware of the danger standing right before her.
This is so premeditated, y'all. Like, this man literally had like a million times in his head, in his brain, a freaking trillion times to not go through with this. But he planned it out for so long, doing this, doing that, buying this, ordering that, looking this up on the internet, searching this on the internet. You know what I'm saying? Writing up in his journal, writing notes to his family about what he about to do. Like, he had so many times where he could have just said, no, I'm not gonna do this. And he still ended up carrying it out. He was obsessed.
The moment that Kyle stepped through the doorway, his demeanor changed and he snapped in an instant, stabbing Carol multiple times until he was certain that she was dead. After murdering Carol in cold blood, he left the home to retrieve his crossbow. During this time, Louise was busy working in the garden, utterly unaware of what had just happened inside her own family home. She had no idea that her mother was now dead, or that her ex-boyfriend was inside, waiting for her. When she did eventually enter the house, Kyle ambushed her immediately. Louise was restrained with duct tape, her wrists and ankles were bound, and her mouth was gagged to prevent her from calling for help. Over the next grueling 2.5 hours, he assaulted her in the most awful of ways. And just as her sister was about to enter the property, he then struck her with a bolt from his crossbow. Hannah was in a hurry when she arrived, and she entered the home as if it were any typical evening, walking in and expecting to see her mother or her sister preparing dinner. And sadly, she would only realize that things were different when it was all too late. When she realized that Kyle was in the property, she was able to send one abrupt text message to her boyfriend, saying, "Call the police, Leggy, immediately, to mine, now. Kyle here. Police, now, he's tying us up." But sadly, before she had any chance to escape, he turned the crossbow on her and shot her with a single bolt to the chest. Although Hannah had no chance of surviving, she would tragically live long enough to crawl across the home and then find her mother and sister dead on the floor. Those few moments must have been absolutely horrific for her. I mean, not only would she have been terrified that she was possibly going to die, but to then crawl over and find your mother and your sister dead on the floor. Devastated doesn't cut it. With the very last of her strength, Hannah was able to dial 999, and although emergency services would get there rather quickly, it was unfortunately all too late for her, and only a few minutes later, Hannah would join Louise and Carol in death. The officers who arrived at the scene were absolutely horrified at what they found. In fact, it is said that several of them needed counseling after this incident, and quite honestly, I can totally understand why. With the breakup happening quite publicly, and also many people being concerned for Louise's safety even before that happened, well, Kyle very quickly became a key suspect. But of course, by the time officers arrived, he was long gone. Gone, but not forgotten, and when they realized that he was missing, well, they would initiate a citywide manhunt. a manhunt that would end in an extraordinarily dramatic way.
Our overarching objective today is to protect public safety and to locate Kyle Clifford, who is wanted in connection with the murder of the 3 women in what we believe is a targeted incident. We have extensive police resources deployed to various locations in North London and also the Bushy area of Hertfordshire. The manhunt also involves armed police officers and specialist search teams responding at pace in the wake of what has been an horrific incident, involving what is currently believed to be a crossbow, but other weapons may also have been used. If members of the public see Kyle Clifford, they urge not to approach him at any point and to dial 999 immediately. Kyle, if you're seeing or hearing this, please make contact with the police via 999. Beyond the immediate search operation, a major crime inquiry has been launched, and we also appeal to the public for any information in relation to the incident. This incident will be, of course, of concern to local residents. Additional local officers will be in the area today, so please do speak to them if you need to.
With surveillance footage, we can tell that Kyle left the property at 6:55 p.m, only 2 minutes after murdering Hannah. The neighbour's camera captured him leaving with his crossbow concealed under a white cloth as he casually walked towards his car before then driving away. However, once the police found this surveillance footage and the rest of the Hunt family were able to confirm that Kyle was likely a suspect, he seemed to simply vanish off the face of the earth. The initial search for Kyle began 14 miles east of Bushy, where 10 armed police officers with riot shields descended on his family home in Enfield at 8 a.m. the following morning. While invading the property, detectives found letters which were addressed not only to himself but his family members too. Of course, this all but confirming their suspicions that he had murdered not 1 but 3 innocent women. And so, with that said, Kyle was now officially a wanted, armed and dangerous man. Later that same afternoon, the authorities received an anonymous phone call from someone saying that they believed that Kyle might be hiding in a cemetery in the Hillyfields area of Enfield, which was only a little over 100 meters away from his family's home. Probably not the smartest of ideas, because anyone in the area would surely be able to recognize him. But it seems that Kyle had chosen this area for one good reason, and that's because he was not prepared to walk away alive. Once again, police officers swarmed the area and surrounded the cemetery, preparing for what could possibly be Kyle's final showdown. But before anybody could reach him, he would unfortunately take control of the situation, saying that it would not go the way he planned. After reloading the crossbow, he then turned it around, aimed it at his chest, and then pulled the trigger, hoping it would end his life. However, Kyle seriously fucked up, because despite really injuring himself, he would ultimately survive. Except now, he was permanently disabled. So, on top of whatever sentence he was now going to receive, he would unfortunately have to face that sentence paralyzed. Like I said, he wasn't prepared to walk away alive. And he didn't.
Good for his ass, Bean Team. I'ma clap for that, man. Good for your ass. You tried to unalive yourself, because y'all already know how I hate these murderers who then end up turning the gun on themselves because they don't want to face the consequences. He thought that was gonna happen, but no, buddy. No, buddy. Guess what? Now you're not gonna even be able to be healthy in prison. Well, not healthy, but you gonna be physically disabled in prison now, but you still got to go home, boy. You still got to freaking go. Let's go.
24 hours after the manhunt started, this was the moment police found Kyle Clifford, stretchered out of a cemetery in Enfield in North London by police and paramedics. Safia lives opposite the family and watched last night as emergency services descended on the street.
We were all very anxious. We were on edge all night, unable to sleep until the very early hours of the morning, because we're just seeing a flood of blue lights, helicopters, sirens everywhere. We were all very scared.
He, meanwhile, remains, we understand, at the Royal London Hospital after he was found with injuries as he was taken away from that cemetery in North London. The Home Secretary tonight has said that she is appalled and shocked, but ultimately everyone here is deeply disturbed at this horrifying tragedy that ultimately took the lives of these 3 women. Clifford is now being treated in hospital as a family tonight is broken after losing 3 of their dearest members. Ashen Haranag, Sky News in Bushy.
The next 2.5 months would be brutal for Kyle, where he underwent extensive surgery and recovery multiple times, while also being under guarded watch 24/7. In fact, he set a new record here by receiving the longest daily demand on policing in the force's recent history. Doctors analysing his case would realise that the bolt had unfortunately pierced his spinal cord, not only leaving him paralysed from the waist down, but also meaning that it is unlikely that he will ever walk again. In addition to this, he seemed to also seriously injure his voice, meaning that he can't speak for long or very loudly. On September the 16th, which was 70 days after the brutal attacks, he was finally fit enough to attend an interview where he would finally go on to say that he was sorry and even comment that his behaviour was atrocious. However, that would be the only compassionate thing to come from him, because over the remainder of his trial and all legal proceedings, Kyle would go on to avoid, flunk and evade all culpability. But before we get to his trial, we do get to watch this very awkward forced interview in a wheelchair.
Do you accept, Kyle, that based on the evidence, that this is a premeditated murder of 3 people?
No comment.
Do you accept that you have meticulously planned this murder from the moment that you split up Louise?
No comment.
From the moment that she sent you that text message at the end of June, you began to plan her murder? Yes?
No comment.
It's evident quite clearly from your purchase of the crossbow, from your purchase of the additional bolts, from the purchase of the gun and the knife in the 2 weeks leading up to the murders. Do you agree?
No comment.
Do you agree that it shows that you only had one thing in mind, and that planning began when you purchased these items? You purchased rope and you purchased duct tape in order to restrain Louise and Hannah and Carol, didn't you?
No comment.
6 days before this happened, you make these significant purchases that really only have one plausible explanation, didn't you?
No comment.
The only plausible explanation is that they were purchased in order for you to carry out these murders. Do you agree?
No comment.
The opening part of the note reads as such: "Please don't think of this as me throwing my life away. I have lived, and I am grateful for everything and everyone that has been a part of it. It is now my time to leave and be at peace, as this is what I ultimately want. I know you will all have so many questions and wish you could have done something different to prevent this. However, none of you have failed, and there is simply nothing any of you could have done. This is my decision to just be at peace." When you wrote that note, had you already planned the murders of Louise, Carol and Hannah? The next note is addressed to myself. "I don't want to live my life without her. I don't want to experience new things. Nothing I can think of can make me happy. I know I could have gone to therapy, found faith and become a new, better person, but I just simply don't want to. I'm so sorry I didn't wait to move on and find my future wife, have the children I always wanted." What do you mean by that?
No comment.
It's a very self-centered note and doesn't take into account anybody else. Do you agree with that?
No comment.
Okay, if I have to hear this man say no comment one more freaking time, Bean Team, you know what? Take your no comment, broke-legged ass, paralyzed ass to freaking prison then, man. F you, dude. Like, seriously, you ain't showing no, like, accountability or no, like, bro, we know it's you. And all you can sit up here and tell us is no comment to every freaking thing, man. Like, just showing no compassion for killing these 3 women. Like, dude, get the F out of here, dude. He's starting to pee me off, Bean Team. And I'm at the point of, if you gonna sit right here and just keep saying no comment, why won't you just say I need a lawyer and I'm not gonna speak no more or something? Instead of sitting up here wasting our damn time.
Is your intention to make people feel sorry for you writing these letters?
No comment.
Look at your behaviour. Look how calmly and nonchalantly you walk away from that house. You've just killed 3 people and you stroll away like you're going down the shops.
After watching this footage, I am not so sure an injured voice is the right diagnosis here. I mean, it sounds more like he has forgotten more than 99% of the dictionary.
No comment. No comment. No comment. No comment. No comment. No comment, no comment, no comment, no comment, no comment, no comment.
Moving into the legal proceedings of this case, Kyle pleaded guilty to the murders of Carol, Louise, and Hannah. However, despite all of the overwhelming evidence available, he would deny sexually assaulting Louise, which meant that the rest of her family would have to sit through days of distressing evidence while in court. During his trial, the jury listened to his arrogance and aggression, his refusal to let her go, the extensive planning and research into murdering Louise, his deceptive tactics on Carol, his barbaric behavior between the murders, and, of course, finally, his failure to end his life. Like a true coward, he refused to appear in court, which even included refusing to attend his sentencing. It is for this and many other reasons that the jury would take only 45 minutes to unanimously find him guilty of sexual assault. With Kyle already pleading guilty to all other charges, it means that he will now face life in prison for the murder of Louise, life for the murder of Carol, and life for the murder of Hannah, while also receiving a whole life order, meaning there is no eligibility for parole. He also received 20 years for the essay of Louise, 8 years for the false imprisonment of Louise, 1 year for possession of a crossbow, and 1 year for possession of a knife, therefore extending his whole life order with an additional 30 years. So, in short, with that whole life order, Kyle will never be a free man again. During his closing statements, the judge described Kyle as a man who was soaked in self-pity and held all women in utter contempt, which, given the context and the gravity of this situation, yeah, I'd say that's very valid. Now, unfortunately, we are nowhere near the end of this video just yet, and that's for one very good reason. And that's because while researching this case, I found out that Kyle's very own brother is in prison right now for, you guessed it, murder. With this case happening 7 years ago in the year 2018, it is not so well publicized. However, there is still enough information to make a small video about it. And so, with that said, please grab yourself another coffee, because this is the case of Bradley Clifford.
Get whatever you may need. And before we move on to this case, y'all, I just want to say real quick about Kyle. I'm glad that he got life in prison. You know, y'all already know. Long story short, story long, man. He'll never see the light of day. I'm glad that he didn't end up unaliving himself, because I wanted him to go to prison and face the consequences. And it's crazy how over there, if you don't want to go to court during your hearings and stuff, you don't have to. That's wild, man. I would have forced his ass to sit right there in front of that judge and hear these life sentences that you gonna get, buddy. You know what I'm saying? But that's just beside the fact. But it's also crazy that come to find out he got a brother who a murderer too. It freaking runs in the family, being team. Let's find out about Bradley Clifford.
So, what exactly happened to Bradley? Living in Enfield, the Clifford family consisted of 2 parents and 4 children, with 1 daughter and 3 sons. The oldest brother was Bradley, while the youngest was Kyle. What I found interesting while researching this case was that, although we know Kyle is a real jerk and someone who is bad-tempered, apparently he was the quiet one of the 3, and the least expected to cause actual trouble. And so, on that note, let us hope that the police are actually watching that middle brother. Anyway, like I said, between those 3 brothers, Kyle was the last one that you'd expect to cause any trouble, and in comparison, Bradley was the hot-headed one. He was also known to be extremely moody, both as a child and as a man-child. He never seemed to do as he was told, was always disrespectful to his family, eventually fell into the wrong crowd, and then no crowd at all. You see, he didn't have many friends growing up, as he was simply too antisocial for that. But after moving into his 20s, he found himself increasingly addicted to drugs, alcohol, and bad people. In fact, moving forward, he would spend many evenings fist-fighting the locals at pubs and bars like a true thug. There was hope for him at one stage though, at least for a while. You see, Bradley finally landed a job as an air conditioning firm manager and then eventually a plumber. Both of these roles had good money, and it gave him potential career progression too. To celebrate his success, he would decide to buy himself a car that many of us would appreciate, that being a Ford Mustang in a bright red racing color. As a car fanatic, he absolutely loved his Mustang, and you could even say that this was his prized possession. And so, moving forward into the actual story, the month was August of 2017, And being the pub-crawling bloke that Bradley was, he was at the local with his friends. Now, although it's not precisely clear what happened, it was shortly before 3 AM that Bradley and his friends got into an altercation with another group of lads. It is said that apparently the argument was started over one of the friends and his girlfriend, but we don't quite know for sure. Found within this other group, 17-year-old Sobhan Khan and his friend, 18-year-old Joshua Francis, found themselves arguing with Bradley. Anyway, one thing led to another, and before they knew it, Bradley, who was already sat in his Mustang, challenged both Sobhan and Joshua to a fight. Which, of course, is completely unnecessary, and if anything, is a great way to tell that that person is capable of violence. Sobhan, who was sitting in the passenger seat behind Joshua on his moped, was not prepared for a fistfight. I mean, the two of them were merely teenagers, where Bradley was almost 25 years old. It is at this stage that the best thing they could have done was simply walk away, but instead of leaving quietly, Joshua drove by Bradley's prized Mustang, while Sobhan smashed a bottle over the vehicle's side mirror. Given his personality, it's no surprise that Bradley was sent into a fury like no other. Now, I'm sure that we've all seen someone lose their marbles over something, but this, it was next level rage. In an instant, Bradley used his car like a killing machine. He pursued the moped relentlessly, clocking well over the speed limit as he tried to catch up with both men. And what was a small bike with an even smaller engine going to do against a muscle car? Realizing what he was so obviously trying to do, Joshua drove into the oncoming lane, but Bradley remained on their tail and was catching up quite quickly. And then, tragically, the unthinkable happened. He accelerated and then plowed right into the back of their moped, sending both men flying into the air. The back of the moped was mangled so badly into the Mustang's grille that both motors were now unusable, and now both teenagers were on the ground, severely injured.
And it's like just the fact that he just did this like literally out in public on the street. You know what I'm saying, Bean Team? He didn't give a F about who seen him commit pretty much this murder or attempted murder of these two teenagers, man. He didn't give a F about that.
Sadly, the fight wasn't over yet either, as Sobhan lay virtually motionless, totally defenseless, and fatally injured on the ground. Bradley stood over him and started beating him over and over and over. Both the police and paramedics would rush to the scene, where they found Joshua seriously injured. As for Sobhan, he was tragically pronounced dead. With his Mustang written off, they would also find Bradley nearby, who claimed that apparently this was all just one tragic accident. But of course, all of that would change when they found several witnesses and surveillance footage, and they realized that this scumbag was lying. To everyone living outside of Bradley's world, it was quite obvious that he was likely the one responsible. And so, with this in mind, police officers arrested him on suspicion of murder, where, just like his brother, Bradley chose to see himself as the victim. He denied all charges placed against him, this including the charge of murdering Sobhan and the charge of attempted GBH against Joshua. But while investigating this case, detectives would find WhatsApp messages that he'd sent to an 18-year-old woman only a few days prior, where he said, "Your boyfriend says he's gonna go after my car. I'll put an effing knife down the C's throat." So, despite those messages not having anything to do with this case, it would make officers realize that not only was Bradley violent, but he would do anything for his car. Facing a jury in May of 2018, Bradley was found guilty of the murder of Sobhan and was sentenced to 23 years behind bars. In addition to this, he was given 7 years for the assault of Joshua, of course to be served concurrently. Naturally, Sobhan's family were devastated by the news, not only for losing their son, but also for the light sentence given to Bradley, recognizing that, if nothing changed, he would be out by the year 2048. Now, obviously—
Let's see, that's what I'm saying, y'all. Like, he got a chance to actually get out when he'll be in, his 50s, late 50s, early 60s or whatever. Like, I just don't understand why he only get 23 years for murdering Sopan, but his brother Kyle get multiple life sentences for every murder that he committed. Like, that junk just confusing to me, man. Now I understand that these murders happen in different ways, but at the end of the day, they still murdered. Both of them killed somebody intentionally, so both of them should get the same prison, which is same sentence, which is life in freaking prison. 23 years. Are you kidding me?
Smashing a bottle over someone's car is not the most sensible thing to do. However, one action does not define an entire person, and Sopan was known to be smart, sweet, and friendly. Now, it is very probable that, while under the influence of alcohol, Sopan felt too passionate in the moment. But unfortunately, luck was not on his side this evening, and he was matched against an absolute monster. And this is a great example as to why you should always keep your cool in these situations. Saying that, what I'm really struggling to understand here is that, with Bradley being so upset at a tiny chip on his car, why would he then ram a moped? Just to stitch the two stories together here, because this fact is absolutely insane, but with Bradley being behind bars since 2017, it means that when Kyle murdered Louise, Hannah and Carol, his brother was already in prison. Which, okay, nothing unusual here so far, but would you believe that in the weeks leading up to the attacks, Kyle would actually call his brother while in prison and tell him about his plans. Which means that not only was Bradley aware that his brother was about to murder someone, but he decided to do nothing about that too. This is one of those stories where I believe that both brothers should be locked up forever and the key thrown away. And I hope to God that their parents are ashamed of them both. Before I end this video, I'd like to share John Hunt's statement which was made to Kyle, because I believe it applies to both brothers. In a statement, he said, "You were a psychopath who was able to disguise yourself as an ordinary human being. Louise was rightly disgusted by your racism, belittling language, and your levels of misogyny are off the scale. Whatever sentence you are about to receive, whatever misery lies ahead for you in the next 60 years, on your dying day, there will be no release for you. The screams of hell, Kyle, I can hear them faintly now. They are going to roll out the red carpet for you. And at that point, when the person you could have been meets the person you are, you will realize your miserable fate will last for eternity."
You don't really expect something like this to happen to like just someone so close to you, and just came as a shock. You know, we last spoke on the day, so yeah, it's quite a heavy thing to hear. Yeah.
How was she on that day when you last spoke?
Yeah, you know, great, yeah. Yeah, just normal Louise, happy, smiling.
Honestly, one of the loveliest persons, loveliest girl I ever knew. Always had a smile and very positive and hardworking. So genuinely a really, really sweet person.
Just want to show that Louise is just such an amazing person, and like her family, Hannah and Carol as well, were just such lovely people.
When beginning my research on this case, I had no idea how evil Kyle was, or that his brother was of similar nature. These are two horrible stories made by the same family, and it makes you think what horrible emotions must have been felt by all victims in their final moments. And ultimately, what was all of this for? A failed relationship and a chipped car? What monsters? It also makes you think, with these two murderers being brothers, is there some sort of genetic pattern here? Or was this just a mere coincidence? On that note, let me know what you think below. Anyway, that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, I'll see you again very soon in another video. Until that moment arrives, remember to look after yourselves, and of course, each other. Until next time, see you soon folks. Goodbye.
Another great video from the Coffee Man, y'all. Man, I just want to say rest in peace to those three women and the one teenager boy, Sopan, Louise, I think it was Hannah, and the mother. Like, rest in peace to all them. And it is crazy that these dudes were freaking brothers. Now, like the Coffee Man said, I don't know if it got anything to do with genetics or not, but all I'm saying is, you had two bad apples that was in the same bunch this time, being team, like both of them. That's why I feel like, and I know a lot of y'all feel like it too, like, dude, why didn't the other brother, Brian Clifford, whatever his name is, why didn't he get freaking life in prison too? Like, both of them should have been facing the same type of charges, y'all. Another crazy thing is the fact that Kyle was actually talking to the brother who had the accident and killed Sopan. Like, in prison, he talking to him about the murders he about to commit, and the brother who in prison for murder ain't tell the brother, like, no man, you don't want to go down this road, don't do this. He ain't tell nobody. He probably was encouraging them for all we freaking know. Just freaking crazy, man. And Kyle playing that out for so long. Like I said, man, he had a trillion opportunities to back out and not do it, but he still ended up doing it. And last but not least, I gotta say it again. I'm so happy that he ended up pulling that crossbow on himself, thinking he was about to take himself out, but it didn't go his way. Ended up paralyzing himself, and now he got to spend the rest of his life in prison, paralyzed. You know what I'm saying? I'm very freaking happy about that big team. I ain't gonna lie, I'm happy about that. And what his father said to him at that the coffee man read at the end was not his father, but Luis's father said to him at the court hearing or whatever. I think that's gonna stick in his brain for the rest of his life, y'all. Like, because that hit hard with his father. Why I keep saying his father? What Luis's father told Kyle at that court hearing. But I digress. I'm gonna go and let y'all go, Bean Team. I appreciate y'all coming on back as always. And before you leave, just please hit that like button, comment, subscribe, and do all that if you ain't did that yet. And remember this: love, peace, and happiness. Stay safe. Don't stop. Keep going. Yeah.